Hi, my name's Pokorney. I'm one of the cardiology fellows at the Duke Clinical Research Institute. And today with us I have Dr. Peter Smith, the chair of CT surgery at Duke, and one of the investigators in the Ischemic MR trial that's being released here in the late breaker sessions at AHA 2014. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I guess I'd like to start by asking you to just describe what led to this trial and some of the background.
Well, ischemic MR is a big problem. Obviously, it portends adverse outcomes in patients who've had MI and others. And its treatment has been perplexing, especially when it's just moderate. So surgeons have a weapon, which is mitral repair, and they also have bypass surgery. Many of these patients come to bypass surgery, and it's always been a question as to whether you should repair the valve while you're there, or will revascularization result in remodeling that would diminish the MR to tolerable levels and be sufficient. And this question comes up all the time, and cardiologists and surgeons have different opinions, often without foundation because there's not a big evidence base. There have been a number of observational trials, dozens of them, and only 2 very small randomized trials. Those trials basically were prematurely terminated but suggested that repair in addition to CABG was beneficial, but nonetheless not enough to act upon. So our network, the Cardiothoracic Surgical Trials Network, NHLBI sponsored, rated this the number one question of surgeons worthy of study. So we did. We randomized patients with moderate ischemic MR to get either CABG alone or CABG plus mitral repair. 300 patients, 1-year follow-up is what we'll be presenting.
Great. And could you talk to us a little bit about what the results were and the findings?
Sure. Be glad to. The primary endpoint was left ventricular end-systolic volume index by echo at 1 year, and that showed no difference. Both groups had substantial improvement in their systolic ventricular function and remodeling, but it was equivalent in the 2 groups. There was functional outcome measured, and it was the same in both groups. So New York Heart Association class improved significantly in both groups, but were not different from one another. Similarly for Minnesota Living with Heart Failure scoring and other quality of life indicators, the mortality was the same. It was 6 or 7% at 1 year, which is actually a pretty remarkably good result, and it speaks to the quality of the investigators and the surgeons at these sites that did the surgery. The only differences that we saw were an increased number of neurologic events in patients who had the mitral repair. Not too surprising because there was a significantly prolonged operative time for those patients, prolonged ischemic time, and to repair the mitral valve you have to open the heart to get exposure, which can lead to embolization and so forth. So ultimately, the increased length of surgery, the increased length of bypass, and the opening of the heart were all associated with the finding that there were increased neurologic events. There were also increased ICU length of stay and hospital length of stay in the patients who had repair, again consistent with a non-trivial addition to the bypass surgery. As well, there was an increased rate of atrial fibrillation after the repair, again consistent with the mechanisms that we know are associated with AF after surgery. So in the end, summing it all up, it's pretty clear that surgery was effective for these patients, but we couldn't find anything clinically meaningful to suggest that you should add mitral repair as a routine in patients who have moderate ischemic MR to bypass surgery alone.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate you coming and sharing the results with us today, and congratulations on finishing this great initiative.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.